So I woke up this morning to an SOS call from a friend who's an artist. It was about health and finance. They needed to go to the hospital. So my first reaction was a bit of panic. And then I thought of how many friends I've had at some point who have been in significant distress and on the edge financially. I know I have. So there's an affordability crisis in America. Everybody knows it. Recent surveys reveal that 80% or more of Americans express significant distress over affordability issues like inflation, housing, healthcare, and groceries, with many living paycheck to paycheck or struggling with unexpected bills, indicating the widespread financial insecurity. I'm thrilled to have Sylvie Scowcroft on the podcast today. She's a certified financial planner based in Boston whose specialty is working with creative artists. They often have unique demands on them, as you can imagine. Welcome, Sylvie.
Hi. What an intro. That was great.
Are you ready to solve all of our problems?
Oh, let's do it.
I've really been looking forward to our discussion today because these issues are front of mind for the nation in a way that I haven't experienced before. Almost every day's newspaper has some kind of problem that boils down to people's ability to get through the day financially. It's not just political ping pong. This is a real thing. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, and, it's interesting when we talk about artists in particular because it's not like all of these are arts crises, but artists hit them like they feel them with a heightened intensity, and artists get hit first and hardest usually when it comes to, yeah, healthcare, like you said. There's also, like, housing and, like, student debt, rising costs, it
Well,
all.
yeah, and let's get into all of that in a second. I think it would be fun to ask you though some introductory questions.
Yeah,
So,
let's do it.
what is it that you do? Let's start there.
So I'm a financial planner, and that means that I work with individuals and couples, and many individuals or couples have small businesses. So there's some business planning as well, but we do everything from cash flow to investing, I cover insurance, estate planning, planning for retirement, and then also I don't file taxes, but I do a lot of tax planning as well.
Yeah. So, what's your background in the arts? I'm curious why you decided in your practice to have this specialty with artists.
So I would say that I've been pretty arts first in my life. I think the arts came first and the finance came later. I, um, as you know, was lucky enough to grow up in New York City, where I was very exposed. I had a lot of exposure to especially the performing arts. My first paid job was as a nutcracker in the New York City Ballet, and I feel very lucky to have that experience. I danced and sang for kind of all through high school and college, and I not only did I find it to be fun to perform, but I was, like, fascinated by how the shows were made that I was in. It got to the point that my dad learned to come to these shows with a pen because I would ask so many, like, detailed questions afterwards that he had to, like, write notes in the margins as he was listening to the concert, so he wouldn't get caught off guard when I was like, was that song transitioning into that song? Like, what did you
Yeah.
think?"
Like a
Um
producer's hat from a very young
Exactly,
age.
yeah. And then I got to college and I ended up taking an economics class, which kind of spiraled into an economics major, and I also studied dance, and so I've kind of always studied both of these things in tandem, um, and I as I was dancing and looking and singing, I looked around and all of my peers kind of wanted it more than me, like, I could tell that this was their thing, and for me, I also had this other life. So
Yeah.
I was like, what can I do that continues to bridge the gap and, like, uses my skills while also my love for the arts at the same time?"
So you've been in Boston for a little while, but when before that you were in Brooklyn and
Mhm.
you were doing theater producing. Tell me about
Yeah.
that.
I Yeah, worked at the Manhattan Theater Club for a little while and then just met a lot of friends who, write musicals, and so I put on some readings and have I still that is something that I hoped to come back to more strongly, but right now, like, I'm living in Boston for my husband's job, and I have a 1 and a 3-year-old, and this is just not the time for me to be, like, working nights and weekends. So I kind of had to put that on hold and just focus on my current financial planning business, and then I hope to come back to it, in the next few years. But I love the process of producing, it just still fascinates me how
Well,
these things get made.
There's a season to everything, and,
Yeah.
many of the artists that I talk to are doing the exact same thing.
Mhm.
They're figuring out where they are in their life as if they're married and wanna have a family, how that fits in, and they're just trying to, make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah. On your website, this is what it says about you. I imagine you wrote it in third person. This is what it says. She founded the Financial Grove to help remove the burden of financial worry for creatives in the arts. Through this work, she hopes to enable a newfound freedom of choice in projects without having to decide based on a feeling of scarcity or a fear of the unknown. Sylvie believes in the power and utmost significance of storytelling and has witnessed how ingrained financial trauma, coupled with gaps in literacy, can prevent creatives from making decisions motivated by expression and passion. Her mission is to support storytellers to express their voice authentically. Well, I don't think I've read that on anybody's financial planning page. So, do you want to say anything more about that?
No one really gets an adequate financial education, I think, in this country, but artists I found that when people decide to go to art school or focus on art, there's like a you either pick art or money and you didn't choose money, so therefore you're never gonna hear anything else about it, basically. Um, which I personally believe that artists deserve to have more financial education than everyone else. Um, because we started this podcast talking about all the, like, things stacked against artists, but one of the things that is going for artists is that the tax code is favors businesses way more than individuals. Like, if you have a regular W-2 job, there's not a lot of room to play around. But if you have a business, you have a lot of legal tax breaks available to you, and many artists work for themselves and are business. So there's a lot of room for artists to live more fulfilling lives. You just need to know a little bit about your finances. And so I kind of came at this hoping that I could like learn to empower artists to know that because they do art, it's not that like they still have every capability to learn how to manage their finances and feel good about it and have that be a source of empowerment for them. And it's not either or.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. What are some of the issues? Let's make a little list of these that artists face regarding finance. I mean, there really are quite a few of them, but what are some
Yeah.
things that comes to mind for you?
A major one is a lack of predictability when it comes to income. Um, it's hard to that is like the first barrier to making a plan is if you don't know what's coming down the pipeline. Um, and then yeah, there's a lot of societal things as we talked about stacked up in terms of how to get basic healthcare, how to afford your home, how to um
If I could jump
well
in with
yeah,
something,
go for it.
I was talking to somebody who was, thinking about getting an apartment.
Mhm.
They said, no one wants to rent to me. Like I'm
Yeah.
kind of famous, but because it's not predictable,
Yeah.
this income because the way that I'm a freelancer, and the same I'm sure is true for a mortgage. I have
Yes.
a friend
Yeah.
who's a painter of distinction. I mean, he's in the permanent collection of the modern.
Yeah.
Has had a long career. I think he's about 50 or so now. And about 5 years ago, he, got a job, kinda like this supplemental job working at a gallery, and he helps ship things every once in a while. I don't even know if it's full time. And moves art and, installs art and whatever, and he said to me, "This is the first time in my life I've ever had health insurance."
Yeah.
So that has to be
Crazy.
another one of your list of things.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
definitely a big one, and, yeah, definitely with a mortgage, it's because you have to usually they want 2 years of your income history, and so you have to have, 1, that recorded somewhere, and also some amount of stability, um, and yeah, so that's another struggle that
Yeah.
artists face.
These issues of affordability with an artist have been the subject of a lot of recent studies, which I'm happy to see because studies are the way that you really start influencing things. Like it's one way, is just
Especially
the
technical.
anecdotal thing, but
Yeah.
more formalized studies have more impact because they get press, they get governmental involvement and on. But anyway,
Mhm.
um, I read a survey last week of artists that the University of Chicago had published at the end of the year, funded by the Mellon Foundation. Quote, artists are essential to how we understand and shape the world around us. Yet we have long lacked a complete picture of who they are and how they make their lives and work possible. And then they detailed a few percentage statistics of things they discovered. 57% of artists reported being somewhat or very worried about being able to afford food, housing, medical care, and utilities. 37% received income from public assistance sources, including Social Security and state or local welfare. 34% of the artists are self employed. 11% juggled three or more jobs. 28% provided unpaid assistance to a family member or friend due to their health condition or disability. So, does that align with what you're seeing in your practice?
Yeah, there is definitely a lot of uncertainty and unease around a lot of these issues.
Yeah. For me, I'm a writer and I'm pretty sure that I've never um, deducted what I was owed, with my house and whatever. I mean, I
Mhm.
have a laptop computer. That's my office now. But, some artists don't have that situation. Let's say you're a painter. Well, those can be toxic materials. You can't paint and live in the same place. Like, there are real consequences for that. Are there any other specific examples of artist needs that pop to your mind as being challenging?
So definitely having enough space, and time to do the art because if you have to have sometimes you have to have other sources of income that wear you down enough so that you can't actually have time to create the art, which is the goal of having that extra income. Um, and I see a lot of so they're like the kind of tangible money barriers, but then they're also the like psychological, like that one family member who's always like, "When are you gonna get a real job?" Or like
Uh-huh.
all these, um, like if this idea that if you're not making money, the work that you're doing is not valid or valuable. Um, but in an art practice, you often have to generate quite a bit of art before you can actually start to see the returns.
Like, I was once, speaking to a group of college students, and they were, creative artists.
Uh-huh.
And I said to them, "Okay, what do your parents make of all this?" And it
Yeah.
was exactly what you described. It was like, "Oh, I don't," and there was a gender bias too.
Mhm.
The women had an easier time, as far as their parents went, as far at least at this university. And I also found that, who they wanted to date and who would date them also was connected to some of these preconceptions.
Yeah.
Like, let's say a composer. I don't know how many composers I know who marry performers, like a lot. But then all of a sudden they realize, uh-oh, one of us needs to figure some of these things out. So
Yeah.
it's complicated. I think people can imagine those difficulties and are in line with them.
Yeah.
This has been tough in New York where I live for quite a long time. I
Mhm.
remember back in the day when, like, let's say a neighborhood was really run down with big empty lofts and so forth. Well, artists would go in there. Like, they would, set up. They would take over those spaces. They didn't really care that they weren't exactly livable,
Mhm.
because that's not primarily what their biggest concern was. And then soon after they moved in, then other artists moved in and it became a thing, right?
Mhm.
Then real estate developers saw that as being a cool up and coming congregation of happening artists. So then artists have kind of become like canaries in the coal mine with real estate developers.
Mhm.
They arrive, then other think it's desirable, then developers come in, and then gentrification follows. And of course, the artists can't afford to live in those communities once they're
Yeah.
transformed. It's an old familiar tale.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? I mean, I don't think I'm too far off with that.
No, I think that's something that we've seen for a while. And that's why I've seen so many studies and especially since the pandemic, so many artists just left New York and then haven't come back. And so there's a question, especially in New York, about what's the future of the cultural sector. And New York's got to start like building housing for artists or doing something to actually retain all the talent that has been
Yeah.
um, trying to find an affordable place to live.
Yeah, there's been an exodus. I mean,
Yeah.
these things kind of come and go, but it's definitely down. It's not down double digits, but it's close
Mm.
to that. I was talking with a friend today, and I mentioned that I was going to be talking with you about these issues. And she said to me, "Well, don't forget mental health."
Yeah.
Finances regarding mental health are a real concern because treatment and options are limited and
Yeah.
unsupported often by insurance. So, what do you advise people regarding problems, regarding health and mental health? I assume that comes up all the time.
Yeah, and it is a part of the healthcare question, and also often we just bake it into the budget. Like, whenever someone is like, "I paid $200 a session for my therapist," that is just I'm never like, "Well, you need to stop doing that," you know? That just and more often than not, that just becomes one of the necessary expenses that's like, we have to eat and we have to pay rent, and, like, this is part of our fixed cost that we're just gonna figure out how to pay for.
Yeah, you account for it.
Yeah.
I mean, rents have surged nearly 40%
Mhm.
in Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx since 2019. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no way that that doesn't hit artists. There's no
Yeah.
way. Do you think these are just urban issues? We've been talking about New York a little bit, but are you seeing these things more broadly across the country?
I I mean, housing affordability is definitely a national crisis. Um, I think as long as housing is also viewed as an investment, we're gonna be in, like, kind of a sticky housing situation because it can't be an investment and a necessity at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, I definitely see that, like, hitting artists in all parts of the country.
I
Um,
have my son lives in Utah, and he
yeah,
and his wife are just like they have sticker shock all the time.
yeah,
Like, he was raised in New York, and he thought, "Okay, things are expensive in New York, and they're gonna be, cheap elsewhere," and I think anybody who lives in Utah, and else I assume it's the same elsewhere,
yeah,
are really in for a have really been in for a surprise
yeah,
that, um, you know, the old days are sort of going on.
yeah.
And it's just how things are. So what we need to figure out is what we do with that. Let's shift a little bit and go macro.
Okay.
I think, you've hinted at this a little bit, but I want to kind of state it a little bit more flatly. Why do the arts matter? And why do artists need a little bit of help? And so I came across a statistic that it just shocked me.
Mhm.
Arts and the cultural sector in America contribute 4.2% of our gross domestic product. That's a total of $1.2 trillion a year. Well, if those arts disappear, plenty of people are hit. Like,
Yeah,
it's not just the entertainment industry that's providing all of that money. And then on the downside, what will happen if there's a lack of that. So what do you think then about like the position of the artists in society, regarding what they're contributing?
yeah, I definitely think people take it for granted. Even for people who are not, into funding the arts, there are ways that cultural and artistic innovation hit them in ways that are like, that you can't really, um, put a number on. Like, every visual that you see, everything you listen to, every, um even, like, in the way that buildings are built, and, like, there's a lot of if you try and think about, like, what your life would be like without art, it would be void of a lot of things. Even in, like, I don't know, if you go home and watch TV, like, you watch a lot of Netflix, like, those are a lot of artists that have gotten together. Yeah, I definitely am worried in this time when arts funding has been cut so significantly that, not only are is less art gonna be able to be produced in these next few years, but also, like, the arts education is going down, and so there's gonna be a whole group of kids who don't know that these things could be careers, that they could contribute to society in these meaningful ways because it's not viewed as a meaningful thing. I think that is the whole problem, right? The problem with the arts and the economy is that it's really hard to quantify the value of a feeling.
Yeah. For Christmas, somebody gave me a book that was a chef, um, Tom Colicchio, the chef on Top Chef.
Mhm.
He has a bunch of restaurants around the country. It's kind of like a biography and an autobiography and a cookbook put in one. And he said that what happened with COVID is all of the restaurants were shut down, obviously. So
Mhm.
this was billions of dollars, right, worth of stuff. The problem was they were all individual businesses and
Mhm.
they had no leverage. So in COVID, there were other industries, large industries, manufacturing, farming, and whatever, who all went to the government and said, "Hey, we're going to need some help." Of course, famously, the banks did,
Mhm.
but the restaurant community didn't. And so he set up this little call. It was like a Zoom call, and he reached out to every restaurant that he could. Mom and pop, four-star restaurant, like whatever it was, all across the country. In the first week, like 10 people showed up. And pretty soon it snowballed. And then they all realized it wasn't about forming a official thing like a union. It wasn't that, but it was to organize some kind of association that could leverage. And then they went to Congress and made their case, and they got a lot of money, and that kept them alive. That kept them going. And I think one of the issues that we're kind of dancing around with artists is they're all individuals. They
Yeah.
have very little bargaining power. Like the organizations that represent them, if you're a performing arts entity
Mhm.
or like a big museum, or a big publisher or whatever, those people have leverage. But the individuals are kind of out there on their own. I mean,
Yeah.
is that how you see it too?
Yeah, I mean, I do work with a lot of people who are part of a union. And I mean, there are sectors of the arts where that is unique because there are so many unions in a lot of other parts of the world or the country. The unions have fallen out of favor.
Yeah.
But even then, most like say that you are a lighting designer and you are in a union, the people who you're bargaining against are like the producers. They're not, and like you're kind of pitting the artist against other artists in a way. It's not like the other forces that people with more money are able to like step
Interesting.
in and actually create some power here. So, but yeah, the individual artists are very much on their own.
It's like, good luck.
Yeah.
I was curious. I read something on your website that just really struck me, and I don't think I had ever thought of it this way. You had commented that financial issues affect the art that the artists want to make in the first place.
Mhm.
And so tell me more about that.
Well, I think there's two ways to think about that. Like, one is if if you're drawing from your lived experience and you have a lot of financial issues, like that's going to come through in some way. And the other way is if you carry a lot of stress and anxiety, that's going to affect your art. And finances are a big driver of stress and anxiety. And it becomes harder to kind of get yourself in like a generative, creative place when you're carrying all of that around.
I've noticed with visual art, there's been a trend, maybe in the last 3 years or so, of artists, including, blue chip in every museum that matters kind of artists, to go smaller and smaller and smaller.
Hmm.
And so, because that's been recently what's been selling. But as you've been talking, another thing that strikes me about these issues about insecurity is it affects scale and ambition.
Hmm.
So if you're kind of on the edge and you're a composer, the chance of you writing a huge work on spec in particular is unlikely to happen.
Yeah.
The great American novel that's just going to sit in somebody's closet shelf on the shelf is unlikely to happen if people just don't feel secure to even, try.
Yeah. And I was noticing that last year, a lot of the popular books that were up for awards were like very short
Really?
or pretty short books. And also, if you look now, even on Broadway, like the Tony winner from last year is like a three-person musical. And this year, there have also been some like very small casts.
Yeah.
Um,
I've
yeah,
seen them.
yeah, I've definitely seen
You're
that. Yeah.
exactly
And they're great. Some of them are
right.
great. It's not like that they have no place here, but you don't really see as many with the huge budgets or huge amount of people
Yep.
involved.
It's not just about money. You also mentioned in your writing about other kinds of assets.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So it's we think a lot about money and how money can give you the things that you want, but I think we have all these other ways in which we um, can operate in the world. And so you have money and you have energy and you have attention. Because especially, I think attention is really interesting because the way that we talk about attention is like you pay attention. So you're paying for whatever
Uh-huh.
inattention. And I've been thinking about that a lot because I think that even like we talk about how smartphones have changed our lives, but I think the arts are also struggling from that because people are paying attention to their phones instead of paying attention to these other larger um like things that they're able to consume as a community. And also when it comes to energy, you have finite energy, and sometimes you wanna pay for the things that drain your energy, but not pay for the things that give you energy. So when we're talking especially that comes up a lot in kind of like cash flow and budget questions. It's just like we wanna make sure that you are spending your capital, whatever that means, in a way that makes the most sense for you. And so it's really different, every person that I talk to.
I've been a little bit of a historian with art for a long time. And, let's say the last 100 years, I've found amazing art has come out of really tough times.
Mhm.
You know, wartime, depression, political unrest, those things, they're not they're not anti-art as
Yeah,
motivations. In some ways, they really stir things along, because there's a reason to make something and their
yeah,
expectations are different. But it's a slightly separate issue when everybody around you is also really struggling, or if you're the only one. I don't know, somehow it just feels
yeah,
a little bit different. Yeah. You've been talking a tiny bit about disruptions. You mentioned the phones, but there are a bunch. I mean, like,
yeah.
what are some threats that come to mind for artists?
I mean, I think we have talked about a lot of them just in terms of, like, social infrastructure and
I have a little bit, and how about if I
okay,
name one and then you kind of explain
okay, go
why
for
that
it.
might be a threat? Is that a
Yeah.
kind of maybe a good format? Let's say AI, big
Mhm. Oh,
disruption
yeah.
for artists.
Yep.
How is that hitting them?
It's interesting because it kinda depends on the field, um,
Yeah,
but, like, AI can write and AI can design photos and video even, and, images, and I think it's not very like, it can also create films. Um, it can co-host a podcast. It can do all sorts of things that people were able to do before, and I think what's gonna become I don't think it's definitely not going away, so I think as artists, we're just gonna have to do what we've always done and learn how to kind of adapt,
yeah,
um, and
and
I
the
think
idea that it's
taste
a tool the idea that it's a tool.
yeah, it is a tool, and it's gonna take some jobs, but it's also, I think, gonna create some jobs. Like, if you think about the internet has taken a lot of jobs, but it's also created a lot of jobs that we never could have imagined,
Yeah.
and I think, curation and taste is gonna be really important going forward, um, because and so, yeah, I hope that we don't get, like, sucked into all being the same and we are able to heighten our different sensibilities and be able to, like, dig through the noise and to be able to still curate things that are intelligent and good that only we can do, just with the help of AI.
I'm so glad that you mentioned this idea of taste because it goes back to arts education.
Yeah.
Like, if that disappears, there's there's a gap.
Yep.
There's a gap. And I have friends who are commercial photographers, quite a few in New York, as you can imagine, have in that field. And it's been brutal for them,
Yeah.
5 years. Brutal, brutal for them. What
Yeah.
about government support for the arts? Where do you see that now? Do you
So,
have
I
any?
mean, organizations are just not getting grants, so they're not making work, and when they don't like, if a nonprofit organization used to commission a lot of things, and now they can only commission half the number of things, then half the amount of artists get to be paid for their work and get their work shown off and get to experience that career boost. I think that's just gonna be unfortunately, like, we'll just have a fewer things emerge
Yeah.
at this time. It also does just, like, discount the arts as a field in a way that really bothers me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
You think?
yeah.
I've been so proud of myself for my many, many, many years of living to not
Mhm.
be overly political and to just irk people no end. But here's a story that I've never told, but I'm going to tell you. So last year, I work with composers sometimes, and I write the librettos for operas. And an opera that was commissioned by a company in Boston, where you are, um, uh, got an NEA grant, so National Endowment for the Arts grant, and it wasn't a huge grant, but most of those grants aren't huge. And we were about a month away before the premiere when the NEA wrote us a letter, and they wrote hundreds and hundreds of these to anybody that they decided they should send it to, canceling the grant.
Hmm.
Fortunately for me, the company had already spent it, so they didn't claw it back. But the letter was just the most bizarre thing you've ever read in your life, Sylvie. It said, that the purpose of our opera was based on history, so I don't know what the
Mhm.
was with that. But they said it didn't align with the current government's goals, which were s- make America healthy again, beautify the District of Columbia. I mean, I had this list of
Mhm.
things, and I thought, these have nothing to do with the arts. What are you talking about? It was just so weird. So wherever you sit on the political spectrum, and hopefully people are straddling where they're sitting on the political spectrum, I think everybody has to acknowledge that government supports for the arts have changed. It's
Yes.
not the same as it was.
Yeah. It's not the same. And on some side, like this just gets into a question of a lot of people who are like, well, if the government supports the arts, then they get to control what they say, which just like undermines exactly the point of the arts, I think. And so then it's like, why, like, really, why fund it if that's what you think? Because I would rather have the resilient artists that I know come up with funding themselves and have a government who tells them what they need to say. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. It's not been an easy time, and for people who work in the organizations that are in charge of putting these things forward, it's just been just heartbreaking.
yeah,
Some of them are toward the end of their careers, and this is how they're gonna go out.
yeah,
Like, this is
it's
really,
tough.
really not
Yeah.
good. Have you heard of any other countries who are doing something different than we're doing regarding their support for the artists?
Oh, lots. Um, there are many countries who do provide housing for artists, which I know that New York has talked about doing soon, and I hope that they do. The most recent is I think in 2025, Ireland started giving universal basic income to their artists, and they
Okay.
did it for a trial period. And I'm pretty sure it went well enough that now they're going to continue it, which is very cool. Um, so I would say most other countries value their artists more than the United States currently does.
Yeah. I was noticing, I mean, again, I've been working with classical music for quite a while,
Hmm.
and Europe is famous for having lots of state-run arts organizations and so on. But I come from a long history of farmers.
Uh-huh.
And these farmers do not like it when other people get money. On the other hand, they're completely happy to get farmer subsidies. Very happy about that. And I think the same thing could be true for manufacturers and any number of other industries. And so I don't understand uh why art makers don't often have that same kind of support given how much they're contributing in tangible ways,
Hmm.
as well as the intangible ways. I don't know.
Yeah, me neither.
Are you gonna run for office? I feel like I this sounds like I should be running for office.
It does, yeah.
So let's say a new client
Mhm.
calls you up. What are some of the things that you begin talking about?
So usually there's like one specific pain point or one specific question that's been like kind of noodling around in their head for a long time or something urgent that needs to happen. And so we address that and figure out why it is that they called me at this point. And then I always try and get a sense of what their goals are, like both immediate and kind of in the long term. Um, I say I do retirement planning, but for a lot of artists, they don't really wanna retire. It's more just like, I wanna create a life in
That's
which I can
right.
just keep doing this for as long as possible.
That's
But
right.
then there's the occasional one who's like, I wanna, like, potentially not work after I'm 60 or whatever,
I
but
I turned 65 in, like, 4 weeks,
Uh-huh.
and, the idea of retirement is like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, there's no visualization that comes to me. Okay,
Yeah.
keep going,
Um,
sorry to interrupt.
so I like to know that. Like, I like to know what their ideal, like, next 3 years look like, 10 years look like, and then the span of their life, what they ideally want, and then we talk about what they do have coming in, what projects are on the horizon, and kind of get a sense of the landscape. And then basically the work of the planning is trying to align their assets, like time, energy, money, attention, with what they say their goals are. And so maybe that's redirecting some money in a certain way. Maybe that's focusing in a different direction, or stopping to physically do things to free up some energy to do other things and free up some time, really. And a lot of it is money questions because obviously I'm a financial planner, but the other things all come up.
What about somebody I talk a lot with artists, in the emerging artist category
Mhm,
who don't really have any money, who are not really
mhm.
thinking about any of these
Yeah,
things in the future, but they're starting on paths that if they continue going down them are not going to be productive for them
mhm.
potentially. Do you ever have advice for people who are just starting out?
Sure. Yeah. I think the setting yourself up well with, like, some form of financial foundation creates the space for you to when you do have more money to be able to put yourself in a good place. Um, so a couple of easy things to do is trying to separate your personal from your business expenses. They get all mixed up, and anything that you view as a like, "This is an expense for my art," try and keep that separate. Um, Make sure that you stay out of credit card debt, like, at all, like, in any way possible. Um, if you have any money to set aside, starting to save for retirement, like, put money into a Roth 401k or Roth IRA is always the first line of defense when it comes to saving for the future. But even before that, just make sure you have a cash cushion. Make sure you have, like, 1 to 3 months of expenses set aside. Sometimes more than that if you're able to save more than that because when I mean, a lot of my clients work, like, I don't know, they get, like, 1 big job a year, and then that money has to last for the whole year, so we wanna make sure we have enough cash just in case there is no more money coming in for 6 months, you know? Um, the other thing I talk about a lot, which I find that when you have a W-2 job, you're able to kind of spend based on the money that you have coming in, but when you don't know what that is, you need to know how much you want to spend every month. So take a look at, like, what is your rent? What is your like, what is how much does it cost for you to live in the world? And then you can kind of map that onto the jobs that you're seeing and see what so, like, say you get a big check coming in, you could know, like, "Oh, this is 3 months of expenses, and I don't have to worry about my anything for the next 3 months," or, "This is only 2 weeks of expenses, like, is it worth the time that it's gonna take me to do this if it's only covering my expenses for 2 weeks?" So, that's a question that I also have a lot.
Excellent. In my LDS community here, there are many professions represented, attorneys and
Mhm,
doctors and accountants and Wall Street folks and more Wall Street folks. And over the years, I've seen them come and go. But I was surprised recently to look at the long termers, and many of them are artists, and
mhm,
they've just figured out a way to make it work. I mean, they're
yeah,
scrappy. Like you said, like if they get a payday, they don't blow the dough
mhm,
because they know that, there's no guarantee about
yeah.
that
Yeah.
continuing
I
on.
mean, despite the name of it, financial planning is definitely more of an art than a science, so creativity is very helpful
Yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
it comes to piecing these things together.
Do you have any examples that you could share of, like, when your, planning advice worked for somebody and how that affected them, if they could do different kinds of work, if it just relieved their stress levels, and how it affected their families and others that are around them? Anything
Mhm.
like that?
Yeah, so I kind of the process that I just described tends to make a difference. I worked with a couple recently who they laid out their year and what they knew what was coming in, and then they looked at if they kept spending as they're spending this month, how would it project out? And they saw that there was like a $40,000 gap in between what they need to felt like they need to spend and what they had coming in. And that is a lot, like, instead of just always carrying around this, like, I need to never spend any money. like, need to get all the like, I don't have enough money. Like, having an actual dollar value on that made them able to go out and be like, "I'm gonna book this gig. I'm gonna work really hard, and or I'm gonna get this part-time job that pays me." I, like, know the gap that I have to fill, and so you can approach these conversations with just, like, way more confidence and peace of mind. Um And they could decide, like, does it sound easier to go out and find a job that will pay them this extra 40K, or does it sound easier to just cut your budget and, like, live a little bit more frugally? And so and when it becomes a tangible choice, I see it become a lot easier to wrap your head around.
Yeah. I love the stories of people who, find solutions, not
Mhm.
in the arts, but I think
Yeah.
we're talking about the art. I just love solutions, and I didn't want this conversation to be too full of doom and gloom, so I was looking for a few anecdotes that were fun, and I came across one, an artist named an artist named James Sundquist, and he
Uh-huh.
wanted to exhibit his work at the same time as these huge art fairs, but those things are expensive. I mean, a booth can cost a gallery many thousands of dollars. So He and his business partner, Jack Chase, curated their own exhibit with local artists, and they rented a few U-Haul trucks and they hung all the work inside like it was a little gallery, and they parked these trucks in front of the fair. Like, brilliant, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant idea. Um, I'm sure there are artists listening to us right now and some others who care about artists in their lives and want to share this information. So give them a piece of good advice.
Um,
Give them a freebie.
I feel like I've already given away all of my freebies. The parting thought that I would leave is just like, if you have the means to and you're not an artist, please fund the arts. And if you are an artist, know that that you have every ability and even more capacity than someone who's not in the arts to be able to get a handle on your finances and feel good about it.
Really good.
And artists are resilient, and I think arts will continue to thrive despite all the things that are acted up, like stacked up against it.
Yeah, there's a many century history of scrappy artists,
Yeah,
working
it's
against
true.
the odds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any final words for us today?
I mean, I think this conversation is great because the more we talk about it, the more it will become easier to, well, one, it will we've talked a lot about macro issues that I'm hoping eventually could someone who is a decision maker will be able to take seriously. And then also there are just not very many conversations happening about art and money on an individual level. And so I appreciate the chance that you gave me to talk about it.
Thank you. It's been certainly my pleasure. I've been working in the last few years on topics of art education in schools,
Mhm.
something that I care about because, growing up on the farm, that was very meaningful to me, the stuff that I had. And not that I was any good at any of it, but I got to participate in it. And I would say that perhaps worse than arts education in schools is financial education.
Yeah.
Kids get nothing about
I get
this.
nothing. Yeah.
Nothing about this. Yeah. Listeners, I'd love you to chime in with your own stories and opinions on these important topics. The Center Studio podcast is available on two formats. There's an audio only version, which is available through all the major podcast platforms, and you can leave notes on the center's website podcast page about your own experiences. And then this podcast is also available as a video on YouTube. And so just in the comments there. And I think it would be really interesting to get some kind of a community discussion about it. I'm also curious, and we haven't even touched this at all, and mostly you're qualified, but I'm unqualified. What are artists you know, in other countries doing? Like, how is this working for them? And what are they seeing? And what kind of support or lack of support are they seeing? And specifically, maybe with the church, like, if I've been recently, maybe in the last week, I probably had communications with 20 people from Nigeria. And I would love to reach out to them, go back to them and say, okay, what's your landscape with some of these issues? I would just be fascinated.
Yeah,
That,
I would be too. So please
yeah,
share.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. My thanks, Sylvie, for your expertise on these issues. How can somebody reach you?
My website is financialgrove.com, and that's the easiest way. You can email me or schedule a call through that website.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for all of your help. I don't want to get precious about this, but I'm of a certain age. And when I see people as thriving adults that I also knew as little tiny pre adults, it just warms my cold New York heart. So it's great to talk to you today.
Oh,
Congratulations
thanks,
on all the
Ben.
cool
It's
stuff
been a
you're doing.
pleasure. Always
All right.
pleasure.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.